All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs, cats, other folks, good morning. My name is Christopher Penn. There are no microphones in this room, so you're just going to have 90 minutes of me yelling. I applaud every single one of you for being here. When I was in college, the hardest class for me was statistics at 8:30 a.m. And as they said in Batman The Dark Knight, you either die a hero or you live long enough to be a villain. Here I am teaching statistics at 8:30 a.m. So this is building a data-driven, AI-powered customer journey. A couple of housekeeping notes. We're going to do sort of a hybrid. I was originally going to do just a slide talk and things, and then they said, oh, you have 90 minutes. Like, okay, well, maybe we'll do a little bit of a hybrid. So the recordings of what's on screen and what I'm doing will be available. If you want a copy of the recording, just leave your business card with me at the end. Second, this is not a class on how to use Google Analytics 4. This is not that class. Out of curiosity, how many people feel like on a scale of beginner, intermediate, advanced, how many of you feel like you're beginners at GA4? Okay. How many intermediate? Okay. How many advanced? Okay, so there's no advanced. Okay, great. To give you a sense of context, teaching a GA4 course is about 6 hours of instruction time. So just know that. We do have one available. The precept for today is this. Analytics without action is distraction. One of the things that we do most wrong with analytics is we make a lot of analysis. We do some great insights. We come up with great charts and things, and then it gets put on the slide. Stakeholders nod at it, and then go and do whatever they were going to do anyway. Right? So if you're not using analytics to make decisions, then there's no point in doing it. Whoops, wow, I went straight to the end. That was awesome. So what does it mean to be data-driven? Right? That's what we're talking about, the data-driven customer journey. We're going to talk about using tools like Google Analytics to inform parts of it, and then using generative AI to help make that journey better. But what does it mean? What it means is fundamentally this. When you are using data, when you're making decisions, you are using data to make those decisions. If you've ever used a mapping application, right, and it tells you where to go, and you actually listen and follow the directions that it's giving you, that is literally being data-driven. If, on the other hand, you're like my one relative who's like, I know how to get there, and just completely ignores what's on screen, and we drive in circles for an hour and a half, that's not being data-driven. That may be data-informed, but it's not being data-driven. If you have stakeholders who are saying, we are committing to being data-driven, then when the computer tells you to turn left, you turn left, whether or not you think it's a good idea. To make the most of what we're going to do today, there's some data governance prerequisites. You've got to have good data to be data-driven. In the same way that you have to have good ingredients to cook a meal, right? No matter how skilled you are as a chef, if the ingredients are all rotten, you're not making anything good. So in Google Analytics 4 specifically, there's 3 tests you can do to see how good your data is. Now, I'm going to show a couple of slides. Let's just do it live. Google Analytics 4 is, and I'll talk more a bit about this, but it's a pain in the ass. Right? It is a pain in the ass. Almost no one likes it. And the reason almost no one likes it is because it was made not for our benefit. It was made for Google's benefit. A bit of history. Google Analytics used to be called Universal Analytics, which used to be a product called Urchin. It was made to measure web pages. Google Ads came out years later, and that was designed really for these devices, smartphones, and they had a different measurement model. About 4 years ago, Google said, hey, we need to unify our ads model and our analytics model so that our ads look better when people are analyzing them, and that's why we all got stuck with this piece of software. The diagnostics you want to run, there's 3 sections in Google Analytics. There's reports, explorations, and attribution. The explorations are the ones where you'll actually get useful information. The built-in reports suck. There's just nothing helpful in there. So the first thing we're going to want to look at is what data do we even have? So I'm going to go into dimensions. I'm going to choose my source medium. Let's go ahead and scroll down here to session source medium as my dimension. And for my metric, I'm going to pull in sessions. Generally speaking, for marketing purposes, you will be looking at sessions. And the reason for that is because a session is what somebody did that time to visit, how they got to your bookstore's website, right? There's user information, which tells you about the person, which is great. There is page views, which tells you what pages someone are on. But most of the time, as a marketer, you care about how did somebody get here and what did we do to make that happen? So in here, I have my session source media. My number one is Substack email. Number two is Google Organic. Number three, direct none. So this one here is kind of a problem. This tells me that I'm getting some traffic that doesn't have attribution on it. So that tells me I need to do a better job with my governance. That's one of the three things to look for is, do you have traffic coming into your Google Analytics instance that doesn't have attribution? Other things to look for are weird things like this where there's commas and things that just don't make sense. You want to do this as part of your data governance diagnostic because if this is wrong, everything else in Google Analytics is wrong. There is no way to repair this either. Once you get bad data in, you cannot go back. Nothing about Google Analytics is ever retroactive. So you want to do this analysis first. Okay. So now that we took a quick look at where you find that in the exploration model, again, source medium, really important. Things that are not set, that's a problem. That means that, again, you've got people visiting your website that are going to have no data about them. Second thing you want to look at is your conversions and your events. What events do you have set up, and what conversions do you have set up? Obviously, for a bookstore, one of the conversions is going to be pretty straightforward, right? Like, filled a shopping cart, cleared it, and checked out. That's good, but there's other things you do. My oldest just started their second semester at Framingham State, and we're stuck with Follett. But the checkout process for things is all over the place, right? So there's some things where, it's an online cart. There's some things where he has to go pick up a book at the store. There's some things that I don't even understand what it is they're trying to do, but only some of that can be measured in Google Analytics. So you will want to go into your Google Analytics and figure out what events do you have, what conversions do you have set up, and are they right? Like, do they make sense? Are there different things people can do to give you money that you are tracking and keeping track of? And the third diagnostic is looking at your channel groupings. What traffic are you getting in which buckets? Because this tells you, at a very quick glance, how are people getting to your website? Right? So in this case, for my website, this is mostly email. There's organic search, direct, etc. If you are spending any kind of money or serious effort on a channel that isn't on here, you know that probably something is wrong with the tagging and tracking. Like, as long as you're getting feedback from people like that the ads you're running is working, then when you look in here and say, where are my ads? If they're not here, you know there's a data governance problem. So those are the three tests you want to run before you do anything else. Before you can do anything else, you want to make sure that the data you have is good. Also, I should have added, because this is more of a workshop style, if you have questions along the way, raise your hand and ask. You do not have to wait till the end. Yes, go ahead.
I am so sorry. I do not by any means think that majority of the population has this, but when it comes to ad blockers and also
VPNs?
Yes. Would this conflict with your information that we see on our end? And if so, do you know how that would look like on our end?
Yes. So there's three things that students will have. One, there are some browsers that students really love. The Brave browser is one of them that blocks all tracking. And when that happens, what you will get is you will get a fair amount of this not set, right? That indicates that that is a visit. Google saw that someone was there, but there's no data being allowed. Second is, yes, things like VPNs. So people who use a VPN to obscure their presence for one reason or another, usually because they're just downloading stuff that they shouldn't be. Just say NordVPNs. That will not show up here, but it will show up as you'll be getting visits from strange places. Like, why are we getting traffic from like Laos? Right? Oh, because it's being routed around the planet to obscure it. And the third is in particular for people who are using iPhones or iPads. Apple's iOS from 14 onward starts removing more and more tracking data. Now, Google Analytics tags are not affected by that, but advertising tags are. So Apple will strip them off. So if you're running Facebook ads, you will not see that reflected. It will not show up here. You have to use Google's UTM tags. Those are the only tags that survive Apple's quest to enhance user privacy. And it gets more and more strict with every version of the operating system. We're up to iOS 17.2 right now. So yeah, that's what's going on. And for the Apple devices, again, that will come in as not set or direct, depending on how strict they are. Okay. You're welcome. Let's talk about the data-driven customer journey and the preparedness. There's a 5-step process to be prepared to do this stuff, because it's not just as easy as turn on Google Analytics, look at some charts, and you know what's going on. It's actually an entire discipline. My background these days is all in generative AI. That's where I spend almost all my time now. But I used to do this all the time for clients back when Google Analytics 4 transitions were going on. So the 5 parts are: you have to establish the purpose, identify the people who are going to be doing this stuff, the process for building the customer journey, the platforms you're going to use, and the performance, whether the journey actually worked. On the purpose, one of the most important things you can do for any project, but especially for an analytics project, is build user stories. A user story looks like this. As a role, I need to task so that outcome. And you want to write this down for as many different use cases that you can think of where you'd be using this customer journey information. So for example, as a bookstore manager, I need to know how many people are abandoning shopping carts on my website so that I can deploy retention techniques to increase revenue and avoid losing sales. That's an example of a user story. If you were saying, like, we have a lot of abandoned carts, what are we going to do about this? This is the user story that you would write down so that you can figure out what information do I need to build into this project. This is part of requirements gathering. When I look at this, I say, okay, well, so we need shopping cart data, we need website data, so that automatically means Google Analytics and probably whatever the shopping cart software is. It's abandoned carts. We need to track that information. We need to know how abandons are happening. I look at deploying retention techniques. Okay, well, now we're talking about ad tech to try and retrieve people. We know the measure of success is going to be increasing revenue and loss aversion in terms of avoiding losing sales. So just in this one story, you can start to pull out, oh, here's the things we're going to need our system to do. What I would suggest doing is writing these down for as many different user stories as you can for the different things that you have marketing challenges for. Out of curiosity, would anyone like to volunteer sort of what their big digital marketing challenge is right now in the context of a customer journey? And like an 8:30 a.m. stats class, if you don't volunteer, I will volunteer you. Yes, sir.
One of the things that we have been focusing on, we've gotten a little better lately, is converting more sales from the homepage, not have people go down a rabbit hole, because the way, and please agree with me, correct, is the way the bookstore websites are set up. You have your unisex apparel and women's, and then you have tech and all of that. So it's not easy to put everything on the homepage.
Right.
So one thing that we have been focusing on is how do you reduce the number of clicks, but also not clutter the homepage.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you get information summarized on the homepage so people don't have to go to a million other pages to order something?
Yep. So in the context of a user story, then you'd probably say, as a bookstore manager, I need to optimize the homepage or personalize the homepage per visitor type so that I get more revenue and I don't lose users 48 clicks down into the journey, right? So that's an example of a really good user story that you can that you can take from just that scenario. And then from there, you now know what information you need. So you obviously have your revenue data still, right? You have behavioral data, so you know what pages people are visiting. You know about path length, what paths do people drop off on. If you start looking at things like exit rate, what pages do people just leave on? Like, okay, they got lost. Like they here. Even things like how long sessions are for people who are buyers versus how long sessions are for people who are not buyers. Is it true that the non-buyers have like a 3 times as long session? If that is true, then you know you need to do that. If that's not true, that might not be the answer to your problem. So having that user story really does flesh out what you need to look at from a data perspective. Anyone else want to volunteer? So that's the purpose, understanding what your purpose is, writing out user stories. The secret weapon here for user stories is you get a stakeholder to sign off on this. You write user stories and get them to sign off for it, and then later on, if you have, I've had some stakeholders in the past who have, we'll just be polite and call it amnesia, and don't remember what they agreed to. You can produce the user story and say, this is what we all agreed to, and then like, yeah, okay, we're doing the thing. The second thing is the people. Who is doing the analytics, right? In a university environment, there's a lot of people involved because you probably have some control over some of this infrastructure and some control you're working with IT and things like that. So who are the people that are going to be involved? And for the people who are doing the analysis, what skills do they have? Right? So I imagine you're in this room because you or someone on your team is going to be looking at this data. What skills do you have in the different tools and the different processes? And if you don't have that established, it's a good time to do a skills inventory, to sit down and ask people, well, what can you do? How fluent are you in Google Analytics? I had you all raise your hands. The majority of the room for Google Analytics skills is beginner, right? So are there other people in your organization who are more advanced that you could use as resources? Identifying that within your university is important. There may be students on campus who have really good Google Analytics skills because everyone and their cousin seems to have a side hustle these days. And Google Analytics is still the default for a lot of people. So there may be people that, on a work study program can say, hey, we need some help like building our customer journeys. Can you put down your cryptocurrency startup for a second and help us with ours? The third is the platform, understanding the platform. And this is the truth. Almost no one likes GA4. It isn't just you. And if you're using the software and it makes you feel like, wow, I must really be dumb because I can't get anything. It's not you. It's badly designed software. And it's badly designed software for one really important reason. It used to be Google Analytics was a one-stop shop. You would just use the thing, set up your goals, and boom, you could do everything. And as part of that redesign that Google did 4 years ago now, they basically said, hey, we're going to try and make each piece of this best in class. So they took all the configuration stuff out of Google Analytics and put it in Tag Manager. So now you need to know Tag Manager to make Google Analytics 4 work well. They said Google Analytics itself is going to be a true BI tool. So its job is data collection and processing. They said reporting is not really going to be in here. You're supposed to use Looker Studio for reporting. That comes with an upgrade, of course. And data storage, we're not storing really a whole lot of data here. We're going to make you use Google BigQuery to store your data. So part of the reason why it's so difficult to use is because literally 3/4 of what used to be in Google Analytics is now in other applications. And you and your team have to say, okay, well, we need skills in all these areas. When it comes to things like attribution and modeling, the best data is not in Google Analytics. The best data is actually in whatever your CRM software is, because that's where you can track what the individual person is doing and all the different ways they interact with you. If your CRM software does not integrate with Google Analytics, that's a really important question to ask your vendors. To say like, hey, tell me not only does this integrate with Google Analytics, but does this integrate Google Analytics data at the person level in the system? Because that's what you need to do attribution. What did Brooke, when she was on the website, do? What pages did she visit? Can I see that in the CRM? Because you can build models from that. Whereas what's in Google Analytics by design is anonymous. There's no person identifying information in there, which means you can't tell what a person did. So your best data is and should be in your CRM. And when you're out on the expo floor and stuff, talking to all the different vendors and things, that's a really important question to ask. How do you integrate and how much data can we get? It's also a terrible analysis tool, which is ironic given its name. The best tool for doing basic data analysis, particularly if you were like me and you didn't do so well in that 830 statistics class, I got a 37, thank God they graded on a curve, is ChatGPT, the paid version of ChatGPT. Because what it does is it takes away all of the need to know specific statistical techniques, and you can just ask it, hey, here's a bunch of data. Make sure you turn on the privacy switch. Here's a bunch of data. Tell me more about my customers. Tell me more about what's happening on my website. You give it downloaded data, and it can process it. Now, your institution, I know Arizona State just did an enterprise-wide launch across the university for every student to have access to the paid version. But even if your institution doesn't have that yet, they just rolled out a new version called Teams that allows you to have multiple users on one account, and it protects your data privacy by default. Your institution may also have other tools that are more commonly used for business intelligence. Salesforce's Tableau, Microsoft's Power BI, IBM's SPSS. Those do require a lot more skills. So you probably have, again, people on campus. If you have a biostats program, you have people who use these tools already, and they may be able to lend some help as well. Okay, let's talk about the process. What is the customer journey? It's a 7-step process divided into 2 pieces. There's the buyer's journey, which is awareness, consideration, evaluation, and then there's the owner's journey, purchase, ownership, loyalty, and evangelism. These stages each have data in them, and all are an important part of how people choose to do business with you. Now, with your audience, you have competition, right? Even though there's a lot of things that people can buy only from your stores, there's some things that people will spend a lot of time scouring, like Amazon, to see if they can get a better deal on it. So the customer journey is not necessarily linear. People can hop around in and out, change places. But from an operations perspective, as a marketer, you want to say, well, where are people? And more importantly, what data can we get for each of these layers of the customer journey so that we can understand how much we are keeping or losing people along the way. So the first section of customer journey is awareness. How aware are people of you, your key products, the things that you have to offer? How much do people talk about you? How much do people know that what you have is available on campus? How many of you have ever heard of Google Search Console? Okay, a few folks. So Google Search Console is a piece of software that is free from Google. It is very likely you will need IT's help to get it set up. But if I go to just search for Google Search Console, what this allows you to do is it allows you to get to your website. Let's start now. And on your website, it will tell you how people are finding you, what words and phrases they're searching for you, and then what clicks you're getting, what clicks and impressions you're getting. So in my case, this is my website. There's my name. If someone's searching for Christopher Penn AI, there's some blog posts and things that are showing up in here. You want to look at this for your store. You want to look at this for your store. And again, you may need IT's help to set it up for part of your domain. But this will tell you what people are searching for and how they're finding you. This is awareness. If you're selling sweatshirts and T-shirts and merch, are people A, searching for it, and B, are you coming up in the results for that? If I sort this column by impressions, impressions here means how many times my website showed up for any of these given terms. So there's Chris Penn. Most of the time, that's people searching for the dead actor. One of these days, I will outrank him. Adobe Podcast, defining valuable, click SEO traffic. What does intermediate mean? So these are terms that I'm showing up for. In your store, what are the things people are searching for that you show up for? That is your measure of awareness. That is Google in particular saying, here's how much we know about you and how much people are searching for you. And you will want to have this information. One of the things that's helpful is you can just hit export and dump that file out and work with it separately because it's not super intuitive software. But that's a great measure of awareness. Other measures of awareness, social media conversation. Does your university have social media monitoring software? Right, software like TalkWalker, Brand24, Agorapulse, a bunch of those tools. And then are people having conversations about the stuff that's specific to your store? If your store has, say, an Instagram account, are people interacting with it? What kinds of awareness is there? What kind of engagement is there with that content? So that's your awareness. You will need to gather this information. And again, because there's so many different systems involved, you will probably end up exporting a bunch of spreadsheet files. And that's okay in the beginning. There is no one system that has it all. It would be nice if there was, but there isn't. The second layer in the customer journey is consideration. This is when someone comes onto your property somehow, digitally or in person, and is considering whether or not they want to buy it. So these are things that they're going to do to engage with you in some fashion. For example, looking at the pages on your website that get the most traffic. Just what pages are people spending time on? To your example, when you're talking about people getting lost in the depths, well, what pages are most popular on your site? If you go into Google Analytics, which we'll do here, go into Explore. I'm going to remove my session source media. I'm going to add page, and let's do page title so that we have a plain language. Import that. And I'm going to swap out from source media to page title. And wow, that is not what I want that to look like. I want that to be rows. So what are the pages that get the most traffic? And are these pages valuable to me? And so I have one here, I'm doing the account management for my newsletter. I have Google Analytics content. I can see what it is that people are engaging with. This is consideration. You will probably want to do some grouping here. If people are looking at individual product pages, if your site has a good hierarchy like apparel, tech, textbooks, all the different categories, then you can look at the groupings and say, okay, well, it looks like on average, our apparel pages don't do very well, right? There's just not a lot of consideration about that. Do people not even know that we have it? Or are the listings not relevant in the way that we present it on our website? So that's consideration. And it's important to look at that information, again, export it to see what the most important page is. And there are other behaviors people can take that are consideration behaviors. They're not ready to buy, but they might be at some point. For example, I was looking at Auburn University's pages. Anyone here from Auburn University? Excellent. So this is the newsletter, right? People can subscribe to the newsletter. This is a consideration behavior. So you'd want to have an event set up that monitors how many times people fill out this form and say, okay, that's data we want to track over time. Are people signing up for this? Do people sign up for the newsletter?
Yeah.
Good. And tell me a little bit about how often you send out mailings.
I try to keep it to about once a week.
Mm-hmm.
We do get student data, so I don't want to abuse
Yeah, of course.
Especially if it's general merchandise related, usually about once a week.
Okay. What else goes in those newsletters besides?
So if we have specific course material information that's more informational based, so we'll only send that to select groups, faculty if we need adoptions, students if we need to get information about textbooks, and then just as far as beyond general merchandise, we do a lot of sales, but also store information. So
Yep. Got it. Yeah, I'll explain it. The reason why you're featured so heavily here is because I was looking at the ICBA website and you won a bunch of awards and stuff. So.
Well, I apologize for our website. Our system is very old.
That's okay. The fact that you're doing so well with what you got is laudable. Okay. The next one is evaluation. So this is where people are saying, I am seriously considering purchase, right? This is people adding stuff into shopping carts. This is people, signing up for delivery of systems or consultations. Again, you're going to have events on your website if you use Google Tag Manager properly so that you can track when someone adds something to a cart or when someone adds payment information. You can look at those events and say, okay, we are doing a good job getting people into that evaluation part of the customer journey. We know they are doing stuff that has value. We know that they are doing stuff that indicates buyer intent, right? You don't put stuff in a shopping cart just for giggles. You put stuff in a shopping cart because you probably at some point want to buy it. Tracking that information over time is important. And the over time part's really important. It's not enough to just look at a chart like this and say, okay, well, we got X number of events. Is that trending up or down? And if so, if it's going in the wrong way, what can you do to fix it? For example, if you're on the bookstore here, right, and you hit add to cart, you would have an event fire that says, okay, someone added this item to the cart. And depending on your software, Google Analytics does have e-commerce tracking capabilities. They are wildly a pain in the ass to set up, but you can look at individual product listings then and say, okay, here are the products people are putting into their cart, here's the value of them, and you can look at shopping cart totals and things to see what's happening. Purchase needs no explanation, right? People bought the thing, and again, in GA4, there is the e-commerce capability, so at least for that portion, you can track what the value of that is. And then for non-e-commerce things, if you have an assigned value to what that conversion is worth in GA4, it can be reflected here. This is then where you want to start breaking things out, looking at the value, the ROI per channel. So if you're spending money, say on Instagram ads, are you getting your money's worth? The fifth step in the customer journey is ownership. Now we're out of people buying things. Now we're trying to look at what is it that people are doing once they have become customers. So a really good example of an ownership, and we'll talk about loyalty and ownership in a bit, but is reviews. So when someone leaves a review on a service like Google Business or Yelp or whatever, are you tracking them? How many are you getting? What's the tone and tenor of those reviews? Here, Robbie Ward says this is a great purchase experience, 5 stars, and he got a handwritten note, which was really nice. That's an example of you've retained the customer and you have data showing, hey, our customers are happy with us. We want that. You need to extract that data, and if you have a Google Business account, you can actually export a lot of this information to CSV files. If you have digital properties, like a YouTube channel, like a newsletter, things. How often are people coming back? Even on Google Analytics, looking at your return users, how many people keep coming back, right? Once the semester's purchases of books and stuff are over, do you hold on to that traffic, or is it gone by the third week of the semester? And then you're like, okay, well, I guess we just have to wait till the semester's books are announced for the next semester. Or are you holding on to that traffic and getting people to come back? That's the ownership part of the customer journey. There is the loyalty part. So how loyal are people? How much do you hold on to that audience? In Google Analytics, there's actually something called cohort analysis that tells you out of the number of people who came in on any given, in this case, week, how many of them came back the following week from that cohort, and from the following week, and the following week, and so on and so forth. This tells you a lot about the stickiness of your content, of your website. And one of the things that you'll probably find in Google Analytics in particular is that none of our sites are particularly sticky. Now, that particular analysis is under the retention menu. It is not available in explorations, which is kind of a pain in the butt. Actually, is it? No, it's not. I'm sorry, I misled you. It is in the explorations. It is cohort exploration. So let's look at our weekly standards. Our value is active users. And in your case, you might want to create a user segment of people who have purchased from you so that you can see how much you hold on to customers versus non-customers. You might if you have a known thank you page at the end of your shopping cart process, you would make a user segment in here saying, I want to track only people who've gotten to that page because they bought something. And then you can look at that cohort over time and say, how much did I hold on to the people who've spent money here? Because if you don't hold on to people who have never spent money with you, okay, that's okay. It's not great, but it's not terrible. But if you don't hold on to the people who are spending money with you, that's a problem. Okay. And finally, evangelism. How much are people doing your marketing for you? So this could be things like, if you have that newsletter, how many people are recommending that newsletter to others? How many people are sharing it? How many people are posting it and reblogging it on Tumblr and all the other places that the new kids seem to do without irony? Even in social media. So this is your Instagram account. I pulled the data from your Instagram account for the last couple of years and looked at sort of what are the top posts. Are you getting good interactions? Are you holding on? Are people engaging with this and resharing it? You want to get this data out of the different services that you use and use it to measure, here's how much people are evangelizing for us, are doing our marketing for us. One of the challenges that we have with Google Analytics is that so much of the evangelism happens on properties we don't own, like TikTok, like Instagram, like Yik Yak. Does anyone have a Yik Yak strategy?
I mean, our store doesn't, but our students are really into it.
Yeah, they really are. Do you market on it?
I have not.
Have you thought about it?
I'm thinking about it.
I've gotten our students to post on Gig before if something was happening. Just like, hey, just throw it out there or whatever. And they're like, sure, okay.
Yep.
They'll just look out their phone and they're like, yeah, Bookstore's having a sale today, whatever. I mean, it does work.
Yeah. Yeah. Is anyone not familiar with what Yik Yak is? I've never heard it before. Okay. So it is a local social media app that is geo-fenced to your university's actual footprint so that people who are on campus can use it. And it's basically like an anonymous chat room. And it has all the things you would expect to see in an anonymous chat room. But it is extremely timely, and it is very present in people's minds. Like I was on campus, I was on my kid's Yik Yak for his school, and I'm just reading through all the different posts. There were a lot of very timely things. Like, hey, people asking, hey, is there free food at this thing? Right? Yeah, generally speaking, if you want to attract any student attention, just free food. Okay. So, finally, performance. Right? What you want to do is, to the extent possible, gather your information in all the different places it lives and try to put it together in some place that you can share it with others. Google's Looker Studio is the preferred place to do that because it can get most of the data in one place. So, for example, let's go into Looker Studio here. So last night, what I did was I can connect Google Search Console and put that in as a page for awareness. I can go to consideration and pull in GA4 data. And then for those other sources that we talked about, you can connect directly to spreadsheets, to CSV files. You can upload them to Google Sheets, and then you can put that in here. So you can build dashboards step by step, page by page, that illustrate the general customer journey. And so that it would be the way to be able to highlight and explain to people, here's what's going on at each stage of this process. And are we getting enough people from stage to stage through the customer journey? And are we holding on to those people? Okay. Any questions so far? Yes?
This is off topic from Google Analytics. I'm just curious on your opinion of it in regards to SEO. What's your opinion on SEMrush?
So there's 3 or 4 different tools. SEMrush, I think, is probably one of the best tools for digital marketers because you can use the data across a bunch of different platforms, and their traffic analytics are fairly good. The other one that I use a lot is called Ahrefs, and that has more web content in it, but it is very specifically just an SEO tool, whereas SEMrush is kind of a jack of all trades now. But they're both very good tools. I would say whichever one, and they're comparably priced. So I'd say whichever one you're more comfortable with. I think for the average digital marketer, you'll get more benefit out of SEMrush. If you are a data junkie, you'll get more benefit out of Ahrefs. Other questions? Yes.
So frequency, checking data. I feel like the answer is you should be doing it all the time and checking things all the time. But for someone who's like below beginner level with data stuff, where would I begin?
That is a really good question. It's an important question, and the answer is not all the time. The answer is 2x. The answer is 2x your decision frequency. So let me explain what that means. If you are making decisions with your data, like maybe you're doing like your monthly planning, for example, your analysis frequency would be bi-weekly because you want to be able to check in at the end of the month and see what happened. But you also want a mid-month check-in to see like, okay, are we going the right way or wrong? So if your decision cycle is 1 month, your analysis frequency is twice a month. If you're making decisions every day, like what should we put on sale today, then yeah, you might want to check at the beginning of the shift, at the end of the shift. If you are reporting to stakeholders, on a semester basis, then yeah, you're going to have, basically midterms and finals. You will have midterms and finals too, and that's all you need. You don't need to check more frequently than that. You can if you want to, but one of the things that people kind of fall into a trap is just getting obsessive with their data, and there's a point below which it's not useful. Right? Like Google Analytics has, it's a lot of fun to look at. It is completely unhelpful. Let me bring this up here. They have in their software real-time reporting. So you can see, in real time around the planet, what's happening. This is useless. It looks cool. It looks like war games or some sci-fi movie. This helps nothing, except if you are doing something that is a very time-sensitive promotion. So let's say you're having a Division I football game that day, and you're doing a big promotion, maybe on field. Then, yeah, you'd want to zoom in and say, okay, are we getting traffic to this thing? Like they just put the URL up on the billboard. Are people doing it at that time? So that would be the only time where like real time. But this is like, it's cool looking, but it's useless. Other questions about analysis?
Going off of what she was saying, being like a little bit of below beginner, where do you recommend them start to learn more about GA4?
So Google has a free course that is somewhat helpful. We have a not free course that is also somewhat helpful. Here's the thing, I would take one of the courses just to get familiar with the interface, and that alone is a challenge. Make sure you have access to the tools. There is no substitute for just working with it. So coming up with those user stories and saying, okay, well now how would I solve that user story? And is everyone here US based? Is anyone internationally based? What nation? Okay, this may not work there. Google has a language model called Bard that is not as good as the paid version of ChatGPT, but it's good enough most of the time, and it seems to know Google stuff reasonably well. One of the things that it does decently well is answer questions. So how would I understand the unique visitors to my website in Google Analytics 4? Where should I start looking? It is, again, it's a Google product, so hopefully it has some decent knowledge about Google. But this is a great coach to help you with Google Analytics. Right? So if there's a question you want an answer to, and it's not immediately obvious in the documentation, just ask it. It says, what are unique visitors? Here's how you find them. Go into the home screen, go to the engagement report, and so on and so forth. As you get more and more sophisticated in your analytics skills, you just keep asking it more questions like, how do I do this? Or what's the best way to do this? Or How would I set up this tag in Tag Manager? Oh, I've got this conversion on a third-party website. How do I measure that? Or people have to make a reservation for tech services from our Bookstore website. How do I track that? Or I want to measure clicks on the home page for certain things. And just keep asking this thing over and over again, and it will spit out information. Sometimes it will lie, about like a quarter of the time, but you can clarify that. But that's how I would start. Take a basic course, play around with the tool a lot, and then use Google's tool, AI, to get questions like, how do I do this thing? This is one of the most, this class of tools, and this includes ChatGPT and stuff, is probably one of the most underrated professional development tools that's ever been built in the world. Because one of the things that people have traditionally had a hard time doing, especially in public, saying, I don't know how to do that, right? When you're in a meeting, whatever, and someone asks you a question like, I don't know. Or you say you don't know and you're just afraid of being judged. These tools don't do that. You just sit there and you ask them all the questions you think are dumb questions that are not dumb questions because GA4 sucks. You ask them these questions, you get answers, and it's not going to say, well, you should know that already. Like, why did I hire you? So use that extensively. Other questions about analysis?
One other question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a team of, I think eight full-time and 25 students, and we have about like 10 to 12,000 students total of our school. So for looking into analytics, like I'm the marketing person for the store.
Yep.
So it's just me for that like website and all that. So does it make sense for just me to be pulling this data and then, and then I'm sharing that data with my coworkers, or would you say that it makes sense for another person to be doing this as well? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It depends on your organization structure and how things like access work. Like, are there people, individuals, do you have authorizations and requirements? Because occasionally, despite our best efforts, some confidential information can find its way into Google Analytics. It shouldn't, but it can. And also, as much as I don't like the fact that it exists, there's politics within organizations and stuff. So there may be political implications saying, hey, people can see this. Like, they should be able to see our numbers. I actually worked with one company that was really deeply stupid. Their sales team would not allow marketing to see any sales data. None. We're all like, how's that work? It turns out the reason for that was sales had such a low closing rate that the VP of sales didn't want anyone to know how bad things were and stuff. So it does, and that was a real hard one for them to dance around. They got acquired and then everyone got fired. So that's the answer to your question is, in general, as long as people know what they're looking at, it's not a bad thing to give access. With that suite of tools, though, I would suggest for people who are not skillful users of GA4, maybe set them up a Looker Studio dashboard instead, because that's read-only. You can add filters and stuff, and then you don't have to have them getting lost in GA4 and going, where the hell am I? Yep. Other questions? Okay. Yep, go ahead.
It's actually more of kind of with your answer. What I ended up doing just to learn all this is literally I found 5 of the top rated folks on YouTube that were big into Google. I watched each of their stuff. Everyone did something totally different, which of course when I sat there I was just like, but each one did have really good points and they all had different ways to go about it, but you find one that fits you the most. I'm still not great at it, but I'm still learning. People on YouTube, very generous with their information, thankfully. So just a heads up on it.
Yeah. Google has a Google Analytics YouTube account.
Yes, that's one. Yes.
So they do have some trainings out there. Let's do a new chat here. Let's see if this works. Last week, this was not working. So if you have a whole bunch of videos on YouTube that you're watching, or that you're thinking about watching and you're not sure whether it's worth your time to watch them, in Bard, I said, at YouTube, summarize this video. I put in the URL, and I said, here are the key points of this YouTube video. And now, that's 11 minutes of my day I don't need to spend, right? Because it summarized it for me. How to interpret report values, look for anomalies, how to compare data. So any video on YouTube that is public, you can feed into Bard sometimes, and it will summarize it. Okay, I think that's a good segue into the second half of our talk. And the second half of our talk is, so what? Right? You have all this data, you did this great job, so what? This is something my business partner and CEO, Katie, often says to me every time I produce a new piece of analysis. She's like, yeah, but so what? Why am I look at this? So we're going to talk about improving the data-driven customer journey using generative AI. There are a bunch of tools out there right now. You will be pitched by every vendor on the planet. Everyone and their cousin will say, our tool has AI in it. Like, yeah, okay, that's nice. Generally speaking, right now, the guidance we give is stick with foundational tools as much as possible. So ChatGPT is a good tool to stick with. Google's Bard is a good tool to stick with. The tools are made by the really big tech companies because the underlying models change so frequently that someone who's got a software company based on one of these tools, they kind of have to play catch up all the time as these underlying models change. So those would be the tools I would stick with. We interact with generative AI with prompting, right? So you saw some examples. I said, hey, summarize this thing. Prompts in general, it's a discipline, it's a skill to get information out of a language model because fundamentally what a large language model is, which is what powers something like ChatGPT, it is built basically as a giant collection of statistics. Like if you were to open up the hood underneath, it is just a big pile of numbers in there. And the way they work is you write a prompt that has some words in it and some phrases, and it looks at the statistics of that, compares it to its library of statistics it built from scraping the entire web, and then it assembles sort of the statistically most relevant words back into the results it spits out. So that's what these tools do. Therefore, when you're writing prompts to address these tools, the straightforward takeaway is use the most relevant words possible in as large quantity as you want, because the more detailed you are, the better they'll perform. These tools are basically the world's smartest interns. They know nothing about your business, they have no context, but they're really smart. So in the same way that you wouldn't tell an intern, do a data-driven customer journey analysis, the intern would be like, you would not do that with a language model. Instead, you would break down the task and explain it in detail and give it to the intern step by step, and you will get good results. The prompt structure that we recommend using is a structure called RACE, Role, Action, Context, Execute. So this is example one. You would say, you are a Google Analytics certified professional. You know GA4, Tag Manager, Looker Studio, BigQuery. That's your role. Again, I'm giving the tool a lot of relevant words here for it to look up. I give it an action. Your first task is to examine this table of channel grouping data and analyze the overall composition of the site traffic. You'll be analyzing for marketing channel diversity. Context, here's a bunch of data. And these tools can handle enormous amounts of data. Execute, analyze the composition of the site traffic and provide recommendations in bullet point format for a marketer's next steps to increase traffic. That's a good prompt, right? That long chunk thing is a good prompt that will deliver very high quality results out of a language model. There's a download you can get if you go to trustinsights.ai/prompt sheet. There's no form to fill out, but it's exactly this spelled out. You can just print out this one pager and you'll be able I'll move out anyway. You'll be able to then craft prompts and give this to other people on your team so that they can write prompts as well. And you will get a copy of these slides. So how do we use this in the context of a data-driven customer journey? Well, we've taken each stage of the journey, we've gotten our data from it, right? We've spent the time getting this data. We now have to feed it to these language models and ask them questions. So let's do a live example here. Let's use ChatGPT, because I think the paid version of ChatGPT is the best tool to use for data analysis, because what it knows how to do is it knows how to write code. Like language models can't do math. They have no understanding of math. They also have no actual reasoning capability. So asking them to perform operations on math is generally not a recipe for success. So let's take our Search Console data from earlier. Oh, that's still in a zip file. I've got to open that up first. Okay, so we have our search query. So this is that table I exported from Search Console earlier. And let's go into ChatGPT. Let's find that file. And I'm going to say, you are a search engine optimization expert. You know SEO, search engine ranking positions, page content, content marketing, SEMrush, and Google Search Console. Your first task is to analyze this spreadsheet of Google Search Console query data containing the terms that my site, ChristopherSPenn.com, can be found for. We are going to compare clicks, which indicates intent, with impressions, which indicates Google thinks my site is a relevant result for. Let's see. The context is the file we've uploaded. Here's what I would like you to do. 1, analyze the file. 2, step by step, provide some insights into what the file shows. 3, make 3 recommendations for how to improve my search visibility. 4, give me 5 topics to create content about. So that is, minus the misspellings here. Misspellings do impact the results because, of course, they're just comparing words. And what this is going to do is it's going to load this file in. Let's expand this a bit and start writing code. It's actually going to start writing programming code to try to understand what's in the file. So the top queries, the clicks, impressions, click-through rate, position, insights from the data, high CTR for specific queries. Some queries like session medium have a remarkably high CTR, indicating that when the site appears for such queries, is highly relevant and likely to get clicked. This suggests strong alignment between the site's content and user intent for these queries. Low CTR despite high impressions. The query anecdotal evidence shows significant discrepancy between impressions and clicks, resulting in very low CTR. This indicates while Google deems the site relevant, the ranking position or the snippet displayed might not be compelling enough to generate some clicks. Recommendations, optimize for high CTR queries. Oh, we're scrolling off the screen here. Focus on optimizing and creating more content around queries with high CTRs as these represent areas where site already aligns well with user intent. Address queries with high impressions but low CTR. Enhance content for low-ranking, high-impression queries. Content creation topics, deep dive into session medium, expanding on new media and social media, exploring the people process technology framework, clarifying causation without correlation, addressing common myths and anecdotal evidence. So now, instead of me just giving a data-driven customer journey explanation of, hey, here's what's in the data, I can go to a stakeholder and say, here's what the data shows, and we have a plan to fix it. Right? If that number is not going the direction I want, I have a plan to address this particular part of the customer journey. And what's really important is this part of the workshop is using these tools to build that analysis for everything that we do so that we never have to show up at a meeting going, well, here's my numbers and it's not good, and then just sit there and get smacked upside the head. Like, here's the numbers, they're not good, and here's one set of approaches. And you can give this to a stakeholder and say, which do you want to do? Like, what of these approaches do you want to take? These language models are incredibly powerful at doing this stuff, and they work really well when you give them data. Right? They work best when you provide the data. So I could go to this tool and say, hey, let's write some blog posts about how to appeal to students' sporting events. Or I could give it actual data and see what is it that's in here. So that is at the awareness stage. Right? Same thing with just your Google Analytics traffic. You can take your pages and the page views and hand them to models and say, what can we do? So this was an example. I took the content from the Auburn University homepage and I said, what if we could make this more appealing to students? How would you reword the language to improve awareness of everything that the Auburn University Bookstore has to offer? And it said, hey, here's how I would rewrite this page. It's your one-stop shop for everything you need to succeed. Affordable course materials, spirit that shines, tech essentials, convenience you crave, explore what awaits you. Like, that's a decent rewrite of a homepage. Generally speaking, with language models, there's 6 things they're good at. They're good at making stuff, generation. They're good at extracting data. Here's a bunch of data, extract stuff from it. They're really good at summarization. Here's a lot of text, convert it into a small amount of text. They're good at rewriting. So this is a classic example of rewriting. They're good at classification of text, and they're good at question answering, like we just did with that data file. Those 6 categories, whenever you're looking at any task in your marketing, if it fits in one of those things, a language model is a really good choice for helping be a problem solver. So let's do another example. Would anyone like to volunteer their bookstore's webpage? Sure, what's the URL?
So where is it? Loveshops. Loveshops.gcu.edu.
LOPE.
SHOPS.
Okay.
.gcu.edu.
Okay. So there.
Okay, sorry. Got excited.
No, that's fine. So there's the home page. Let's take all of the text from this page. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to go into Developer Tools here. I'm going to take a full page screenshot, and let's do Upload Image. So let's take that screenshot. Here is the screenshot of the GCU Bookstore homepage. Let's just take a look at the screenshot and make sure there's no human faces on it. It doesn't look like there's too many. We might have to blur those out. I would like some UI UX suggestions to increase the stickiness of the page and keep people on it longer. And let's see if it yells at me.
I'm nervous. It's taken this thing a long time.
All right, sure. Here are some UI UX suggestions to increase the stickiness of the GCU homepage. Add more information about the student care packages. It only has a brief description. Adding more information, such as what's included, could help pique users' interest. Add more images of the student care packages. The homepage currently has one image of a student care package, adding more. Add more links to the student care packages. Use carousels to show the latest deals. The homepage has a static image of the latest deals. Using a carousel could help draw attention. Add a blog or news section. Make the site more mobile friendly. And then you can ask question after question to this thing. Well, I already have that. What else you got? Or we tried that and our stakeholders didn't like that. Give me some different suggestions. So from a consideration perspective, these tools can see. You give them imagery and they can see. The only thing they will not work with is human faces. So as long as the imagery you're feeding it if there's a person on the page, just blur it out. Then you load it in and you can start asking it questions. They can do UI UX. They can do UX testing. They can critique psychology of color theory and things. Anything and everything you could think about. Yes, go ahead.
Could you just put the link to the website? Could it analyze the entire website as a whole?
It does that, but it looks at the HTML code. Which is, again, if you were trying to optimize for mobile, that might be a good idea to say, like, yeah, look at this web page's code. Is it bloated? Is there a lot of stuff in there that shouldn't be? Yeah.
If you were to do a prompt like this in the free version of ChatGPT, would you just don't trust it?
Not that it won't trust it. It won't even do it.
Oh, okay.
It won't even do it.
Well, yeah, I know you can't do images and stuff, but if you were just to type out, something like that, would it give you anything really of value, or is this really the way you want to go? Obviously, this is a lot smarter, and what it can analyze.
Well, so this is Google's Bard. This is not even ChatGPT.
Oh, okay. I missed that. Okay, well, okay.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So the models that are built that are underlying these services are kind of their engines. They're all different. The one that powers the free version of ChatGPT is a model called GPT 3.5 Turbo 0316. And what that model is it's built on a relatively large amount of data, but it's fairly old, and it is not as fluent and skilled at generation in particular. It's not as good at. The newer GPT-4 model, which is the paid version, is a much, much larger model. And as a result, it has more general knowledge of everything and is more fluent in language, particularly English. Bard is powered now by a model called Gemini, and it has gotten substantially better in like the last 4 weeks. Prior to that, this was as dumb as a bag of hammers. But they've just switched, I believe, to Gemini Advanced, and they're going to roll out Gemini Ultra in the next couple of months, and then it will be very, very smart. That's the one you're going to have to pay for. But each of the tools is good at different things. So in general, I suggest people use the paid version of ChatGPT. It's the most versatile. But if you don't have access to that, or your university says you're not allowed to use the paid version, then Bard is not bad, and it is getting better. Yes?
So this is Bard, which belongs to Google. Google does search ranking for sites.
Yes.
Would it be better than to do, like keyword and adjacent keywords and intent keywords through Bard because it's working from Google's foundation, or is it fine out of ChatGPT?
It's a good question. Bard's data, we don't know where it comes from, but it's not real time. And it is dumber at language than the GPT-4 model. Okay. The GPT-4 model really is sort of the best in class. The one that powers the paid version of ChatGPT is the best in class for anything language-based. So if you want to do keywords, particularly semantic keywords, use GPT-4. It's just better at it. Other questions on the consideration portion, image recognition.
If you were doing the keyword recognition, would it be better to do the URL or to do a screenshot?
I would use the text on the page. The text on the page. So that's a really good example. Let's take that. Let's take the GCU page here, right? And let's do this. Let's see if I have this installed. Do I have links installed? I do. Look at that. Bless you. So let's see. Yes, allow cookies. That is not working. Oh, dear Lord. Okay. So what I've done is I've loaded a text-based web browser. This is the same thing the screen reader would see if you're visually impaired. And what I can do from here is I can actually scroll up and down this page. And this is what a search engine will see when it looks at that page. This is the text that is on that page. This is what you would feed into a tool like Bard or ChatGPT. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so that's all of what's in there. You can also, I believe there's a way to do it in Developer Console as well. Well, so let's take that and put that in here. And now we can say from here, let's go to ChatGPT, start a new chat. Here is, give it some context. You are an SEO expert. You know search, can't spell today, optimization, search rankings, content marketing, web page optimization. Your first task is to analyze the text of a web page and provide a list of recommended keywords for this page based on the text. And then what I'll do is give myself a little space, put 3 quotes in, paste all that text in, and it's going to go through and read this thing and start spitting out some stuff. So the general keywords, apparel-specific keywords, accessories and gifts. This is a good start. Now, keep in mind, my audience is college students and their families. Based on this knowledge, for GCU students, how would you classify them? Are they fairly well off? Are they less well off? How would you describe? Middle? Middle. Okay. Is typically middle class families with limited discretionary spending.
That's a good way.
Okay. Based on this knowledge, augment this keyword list with semantically related terms that would capture the attention of our core audience in searches. So we have the obvious stuff, right, like GCU shops and things. Now, by giving it information about the audience, it's going to extract what it thinks it knows about who those people are. So now if you start looking, it's going to start coming up with keywords about affordability and value, specific needs and occasions, practicality and utility. So now we're going outside of just the obvious stuff, college gifts from mom and dad. You would then take this information and say, okay, well, does our site reflect that? Do we have content about that? Can that be worked into product descriptions? Right? So let's go back to the GCU website. Let's look at this sweatshirt right here. So here is the product description, right? Let's go back to ChatGPT. Great. Based on our work so far, here is a product description. Using your knowledge thus far, augment this product description to be more keyword rich and still appealing to our core audience. And so just to keep in mind, this is what we've got so far. To make your product description more keyword rich while appealing to core audience, I'll incorporate relevant terms and phrases that speak to their interests, needs, and behaviors. So it's now saying, hey, embrace campus life and chilly mornings in Phoenix with our sport brand handing long sleeve tee. Perfect for college students and alumni alike. Durable pre-shrunk stuff. You have your color, vibrant, describing the color, the material, and so on and so forth. So this now is going to take that listing and really build it out to be highly developed. This amount of text about just that one set of keywords is just putting relevant content about this product at a much greater depth than what was originally there.
If I can just add something to this, is we've used it for email campaigns because we noticed that a big part of the time that we spend in making email campaigns goes into copies that are trying to be written. So we do also have limitations that we put into the prompt, is like write a 150-word copy or a 200-word copy, and it kind of restricts itself and then crams in as much as you can into it, so you don't have to go through.
Yeah. You can, I mean, prompts can be pages long. These tools, the paid version of ChatGPT has a context window of 128K, which is basically says you can put up to 90,000 words in a prompt, which is the size of a large business book. You shouldn't, but you can. And it will interpret that and spit out the appropriate things. So when it comes to your data-driven customer journey, at each of the stages in it, if there's something that is underperforming, you can say, okay, well, here's what I've got. Here's the data I've got. Whoops, that was great. Let's go back. And then throughout the customer journey, just keep asking it questions like, how would I improve this? Right? So we just did the Auburn example for consideration. So here's the subscription page for the newsletter. I asked, in this case, Bard, this is the email landing page. The landing page only has a sign-up form. Let's write some copy for encouraging students to sign up for the mailing list, focusing on benefits such as discounts, coupons, specials, help to save money, etc. And it then produces some decent copy for that page, not for the purposes of SEO, but for the purposes of the consideration phase in the customer journey. How do we get more people to want to fill out this form? Because you are forking over personal information. By having copy that clearly spells out the defined benefits, you will get better results. And if you have a page already where there's a sign-up form, put it through. So let's go back to the GCU page. Do you have a newsletter page? No. Okay.
It's like an info page, but not a newsletter.
Okay. So there's no way for me to sign up for like updates or anything?
Yeah, you can. I think is it in one of the bottom corners. I'm sorry, my eyesight is really bad.
And so is mine.
Contact us. Oh yeah, bottom.
Oh,
the
sign
bottom
up
of
for
the
specials.
Sign up for specials. All right. Get notified of Low Shop sales and specials. Okay. For this particular form, I mean, your standard market would say, okay, well, what are the features and benefits? What are the things why would I do this? What's in it for me? Is there something like super beneficial that you get immediately on signing up? Do you get a coupon for?
I think they get a welcome email. Yeah.
Okay.
Coupon.
Okay. So again, let's take just this copy. Go back into Bard. Let's amend this copy to appeal to our core audience. Oh, I should do this in ChatGPT because that's where we already have the existing stuff. To our core audience, focusing on the benefit of an immediate discount. And go back to GCU, copy our existing, write 2 sentences. One of the things that's very interesting is these tools can't count. They actually don't know what a word is. So they are focused on what are called tokens, which are 3 and 4 letter portions of words. That's why if you say write a 150-word blog post, it will never write 150 words. It'll either write 70 or 300 because they are completely incapable of counting. You will do better with structures. So you say 1 sentence, 2 sentence, 1 paragraph. They typically, for whatever reason, are better at that. So here's some revised copy. 2 sentences, join the Lope Shop family now and unlock exclusive access to sales and specials plus an immediate discount on your next purchase. It's our way of welcoming you to the Grand Canyon University community with open arms and great savings.
You just increased signups by, I don't know, several percent.
I mean, for real.
That's brilliant.
Well, all these prompts that you've been showing us in what you're going to
Oh yeah, that's why the screen recorder is going. But again, here's the really important thing about language models. We forget the chat part of ChatGPT, right? This is an intern. You can have a conversation with it, so if you're not getting great performance out of it, you don't have to have the perfect prompt. There are some models that are very small that, yeah, you need to have a prompt in a very specific format. This is not one of them. The tool is smart enough to say, well, okay, that didn't work. Well, give me some examples. So for example, with this particular prompt, I say, this is great. Give me 5 more variations. Right? And now for every single one of these things, it will give you options. It is. It's an intern. It's an intern. Right? That's.
No.
Yes.
You just figure out how to do this, and then you're the everything.
Yes. It is a force multiplier. And I mean this in seriousness. One of the things we say is that AI will not take your job, but a person who is skilled with AI will take the jobs, plural, of people who are not. So one of the things that is incumbent upon all of us, particularly in higher education, is to figure out how to use these tools and how to even integrate them into education, because they are being used, whether or not anyone wants that to. I have a friend who teaches at Wheaton College, and their policy is fragmented. It is professor by professor whether you're allowed to use generative AI in their class or not. I think some classes yes, some classes no. And so they're having to struggle with rationalizing what does a university-wide policy look like. Some universities have banned it outright, which is not going well, because it turns out that you can block it on a firewall, but everyone has phones, right? So it's not super helpful. But for our purposes as marketers, every stage in the customer journey has the ability to remedy whatever the defects in that stage of the journey with generative AI, right? So I keep hitting the wrong button there. How many of you have ever done, we did UI analysis already. How many of you have ever done RFM analysis on your store? How many of you know what RFM analysis is? Okay, RFM analysis stands for recency, frequency, and monetary value. It's a classic retail strategy of segmenting your database. You segment your database by how recently someone has bought from you, how frequently they buy from you, and how much they spend. When you do that, you get segments of your database. You'll have people who've not bought recently, but they're high value. Those people, you send them an email saying like, hey, come on back, we've got this great deal or special. You have people who don't buy frequently, but they have bought recently. Maybe they just forgot, or they got busy. You can remind them. That's really good for shopping cart abandonment. You have people who buy maybe frequently, but they buy low value. They're just not buying anything more than onesies and twosies. Put specials that are higher value specials in front of them. To do that, you would extract the information from your database. So let's see if I was clever and I kept that data nearby. Yes, RFM analysis. So what I did was I created a synthetic database. You will export this from your CRM, right? So you'll have purchase date, and then you will build that data into a table that has an anonymous ID of some kind, and then you'll have the recency in days, the frequency of purchases, and then the monetary value of that student. When you take that, you can go into ChatGPT. Let's upload our data here, output. Today we will be performing retail analysis. RFM analysis, customer analytics, upsell, cross-sell, and customer journey management. The following file has data about our customers by customer ID, recency of last purchase in days, frequency of purchases, and monetary value of that customer. Our goal is to produce an RFM analysis that can segment our customer base so that we can activate different marketing strategies based on segment, such as non-frequent buyers, low-value buyers, upsell, and non-recent buyers. Take a look at the file and let me know what questions you have. This is probably the most useful sentence you'll ever see in ChatGPT. What questions do you have? Because it knows a lot more than we do about everything. So anytime you're doing data analysis, ask it, what questions do you have? And it will say, hey, I've got some questions for you. Is the data clean and complete? Are they missing values? How do you want to do the scoring algorithm? Do you have specific thresholds in mind? What specific marketing strategies? Then it's going to go load the data. And after it does that, we can answer those questions and say, like, yeah, you can use this algorithm, that algorithm. Or you can say, hey, I don't know. You tell me. You're the intern. All right, I'm going to confirm the cleanliness. So it's going to go through and look at our data. Now our data set, because it's synthetic, is clean. Yours may not be. One of the things it will say is, hey, you're missing some values. How do you want me to fill in those missing values? Right, so it can even do data amendment. Recency suggests 0 to 363 days. Frequency, 0 to 10 purchases. Values range from 0 to 999. Yeah, you can tell that's synthetic data. All right, do you have any specific preferences of the scoring method, or should we go with the quartile-based approach? This looks good. Go ahead with your quartile-based approach. It means divided up into fours, quartiles. It's a upper 25%, middle 50%. So one of the things that also, if you're a university, if you have students who have comp sci backgrounds or are studying, these tools, when they're doing this analysis, are spitting out Python code. You can copy and paste this into a script, and then the next time you want to repeat this process, you don't have to go through this whole thing with ChatGPT. You have that student helper take the data and run it through Python, right? Just run it against the Python script, and so you can produce that analysis. So to your question earlier about how frequently should you be doing analysis, once you have the code from here, you can run that analysis as often as you want. I wouldn't run it like all the time for fun, but you will at least have it in code form without needing to go back through ChatGPT and repeat this process over and over again. This is the best coffee warmer ever.
AI generating the coffee warmer too?
No. It's the fan from the projector is so hot. All right, so now we have our RFM segments and scores. So it's putting together the scores, and those scores you can then sort. The highest score means that's the most valuable customers. So you could take your database, segment that out, and say, okay, this is our list of highest performing customers. Let's make sure that we get them the best offers first. Maybe invite them to exclusive gatherings. Like if your bookstore does things like sporting events, there's a football game happening, maybe you have a gathering for your best customers and their families and say, hey, let's do a tailgate or something. All right, so we've got our recency frequency. So here's the scores. Let's proceed to identify the number of customers in each of these group segments. So you get the idea. This goes on and on and on. By using RFM analysis within your customer database, you can produce these analyses and then take that data back to your CRM and activate those customers. Right? So if you've got people, they're high monetary value, they buy lots of stuff, they just don't do it often enough. That is an easy segment to go back and chase. The last thing you can do on the loyalty side of things. So let's go and do this. Let's see if I still have this information here. Let's do a new chat here. And let's go find, did I save the Auburn data? Let me make sure this is the right data. Yes, I believe I did. I think this is the right account. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's a different account. Well, let's just go download it then. Well, actually, I'll just show you the prepared version since we're low on time. So in ChatGPT, I took the Instagram account of Auburn University's bookstore. It was like 400 posts. And I said, here are the top 5 and the bottom 5 posts based on the number of engagements. And I told ChatGPT, what I want you to do is, based on the top 5 performing posts and the bottom 5 performing posts, write me 5 new Instagram posts that more closely resemble the top performing ones. And give me some additional ideas for Instagram. So a tailgate essentials kit promotion. So everything you need for a tailgate. Campus scavenger hunt and things. So all this stuff that, based on this information, you can build new content to increase loyalty, to increase evangelism, to get people to participate. And if you have the data through a good social media monitoring service like TalkWalker, like Brand24, or if you have access to a CrowdTangle, you can export the Instagram accounts or the Twitter accounts or the TikTok accounts of other stores. Right? If there's a retail store that you really admire, like Bass Pro, for example, like, hey, they're killing it. How are they killing it? Download their data and then say, here's the framework I want you to learn from. What makes their content work? Have it extract that, and then you go, oh, well, in that case, here's my stuff. I want you to rewrite all my content in the style of the best performing Bass Pro content, and then you put it up on social media and see how it works. So you can do what's called style transfer, just by saying, here's the data, learn from it, and then apply it to my data. And the tools will do that. They will do that very, very capably. Yes?
Can you do that with websites, with creating landing pages?
Yes. And you can do it from a copy perspective. You can do it from a UI perspective, like by taking a screenshot of it and things. Basically, if it's out there and you can see it publicly, you just copy paste into the software and say, okay, I want to optimize based on what you see here.
And then you tell it to write it in HTML, or just write it in whatever it needs to be written in?
Whatever you want. You can say generate the right HTML, generate the style sheets that would match the content you see. All right. So, wrapping up, the 5P framework is how you build the data-driven customer journey. Purpose, people, process, platform, performance. You must do things like user stories and deciding your purpose and getting all those requirements done first before anything else, because as you've seen throughout this process, the generative AI stuff is cool, but you need to have the data to make it work, right? The customer journey is the 7 stages we looked at, and the data sources for each of them. And we emphasized there is no one source for all this information, unfortunately. you have to take action on the data that you gather. If you're not going to, there's no point in doing it. And the last caution I will offer is all of these things, all customer analytics, any analytics, all language models, and all generative AI are based on past data. I love working with data. I'm a data scientist by trade. I love working with AI. It's been my favorite hobby for 10 years now. It is not magic. It cannot see the future. It cannot predict what has never happened. Right? If you were to ask these tools, who's going to win the presidential election? They won't know. They'll guess. They can hallucinate, but they won't know because it's never happened before. Even if the cast of contestants is the same, the audience has changed. So this has never happened before. And so you want to balance your use of AI with the fact that some things that, like some ideas you have, may not have been done before, and then AI will not know how to process that. What will set you apart in the age of generative AI is two things: the quality and quantity of your data that you have access to, and the quality and quantity of your ideas, because the person who has the most best ideas will win. AI takes away the skills needed to do a lot of these things, and it takes away the drudgery of doing it, but the ideas still have to come from you. If you are interested, as I said, we have a free book and a not free course on AI. There's also a GA4 course. So I think, what time are we done at? 10 or 10:15? Well, sorry about that. I will be sticking around. Also, you're going to see a lot of this. Andy Crestodino is in the back room there. Is going to be doing this at 1 o'clock today, right? So you'll see him on the main stage. Be sure to catch his talk. You will enjoy the hell out of it because you'll see lots more prompts for how to do the engineering of your e-commerce portal and how to optimize it. So make sure you catch this talk as well. Thank you, everyone.